Welcome to The Learning Curve, your industry podcast on all things on enterprise learning. In this episode of The Learning Curve with me, Kenny, we'll be looking at use cases for AI in the L&D field. With me today, I have the Managing Director of Revium, Adam Barty, and Adam Barty will give us a little X-course into the general topic of AI, and then later we'll focus on use cases in the L&D field. And let me tell you, it's going to be a wild ride because Adam is a really fun guy. He knows his stuff, and to top it all off, he also has a practical example which you can implement yourself and try a little of AI use hands-on. So, time to get your edification game on and listen to the podcast. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
G'day, Kenny, and thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for being on. So, Adam, like I said, today we're going to dive into the topic of use cases for artificial intelligence in the learning and development sector. But before we get to that part, so before we get to the nuts and bolts of everything, let's get to know each other. So, in other words, let the listeners get to know you. So, tell us a little bit about the company that you work for.
Yeah, cool. I guess you could classify Revium as a boutique digital consulting firm. So we've got a team of about 50 people. We've got customers spread across Australia and up into Asia as well. We're all about finding clever, innovative ways to solve problems using technology. So we do everything from experience design, creative engineering, marketing, MarTech, and of course AI, which we're talking about today. So I guess any given day we might have some of our team working on e-commerce marketing strategies or building an enterprise kind of website on a headless CMS. Our AI team today was actually implementing some work on an AI bot for a customer, and then some of our engineering team were actually working on a CPD platform for a medical college. So everything and anything across the digital spectrum, I guess.
Okay, that sounds interesting. But you did use a term that I'm not familiar with. What's boutique? A boutique company. I haven't heard that one.
No, all good. Boutique is, I guess, a little specialised, a little bit kind of smaller. So I guess in our space, you know, we compete against the Deloitte Digitals and the Accentures and those kind of bigger consulting firms. And, you know, obviously they're the big boys, and at 50 people, we're not quite as big as them. But so it makes us a bit more specialised, but also a little bit more agile, and probably gives a bit better value for money, if I'm honest.
Okay. So you're a small, cutting edge, and very flexible.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to summarise it. I should put that on the business card.
No, I don't know. The boutique thing got me, so I think that's a pretty. I've never heard that expression in relationship to a business, so I think that really. For me, that's the standout point there. You know,
awesome.
Boutique cool. AI. You know,
yeah.
Sounds cool. Of course, maybe the Americans are always, you know, kind of have a tendency for anything that sounds French, which the word boutique does have a certain ring to that. All right.
Indeed.
So, so that's the company you work for. About you, then a little bit. How did you get involved in AI, and can you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Yeah, sure. I guess I started in the digital space in technology back late 90s when the internet was first getting started. I founded my own web design business, so I was a massive nerd. Loved computers.
You didn't start in the garage, did you?
No, I didn't start in a garage. I started in I think it was at a kitchen table, but built that business up. Yeah. Built that business up over about 10 years, which was doing kind of web design, hosting, all of that sort of stuff back in the real early days of the web. And then after about a decade, I sold it. Then I moved into a role to build an agency for a large corporate business in Australia. Did that for a couple of years, but I didn't really like corporate life. So then I moved back, hence going back to the boutique consultancy. Moved into my current role heading up Revium, where I've been for the last 8 years. In terms of the AI journey, I think as a technologist, you can't be a technologist and not be interested in AI. It's one of those topics that I think anyone who loves technology, you know, naturally kind of leans into. In terms of, you know, why, I guess I've been so heavily involved in the last couple of years. I think there's probably two sides to that. One is, that nerd inside me going, this is awesome and it's going to change so many things and it's going to make life so much better for so many people in so many different ways. But on the flip side, as a business owner and a leader of a business, it also kind of scares me a little bit. And I think you really need to, stay ahead of the curve, stay ahead of the wave, if you like, because if you're not kind of on the AI boat, then you're probably going to get overtaken pretty quickly. So it's made us really think fundamentally about our business, and being in technology will be disrupted by AI, and it's made us think about how we can lean into it to make sure we stay ahead of it instead of getting gobbled up.
Well, I think that's a pretty good outlook, and a pretty positive outlook, because one of the things I had in a previous podcast, we had various discussions about the human element facing AI and what it looks like for individuals. And there we still found that the one of the big fears basically is that AI will replace whatever a variety of human elements or jobs and so forth and so on. But there's still, I think, a uniqueness in what individuals can do, how they interact, and it's I guess the whole idea is to learn to use the technology and adapt with the technology.
Yeah, 100%. I think, and look, that's one of the things I always encourage people to do, is to actually lean into it a little bit, not look at it as if it's it's going to be the root cause of all evil in your life and kind of cost you your job and all that sort of stuff. Instead, look at the opportunities it presents. There's so many benefits we'll get as a society and we'll get as individuals from the technology, and I think it's something we've seen before. I mean, when the web came along, the internet came along, or when computers came along, there's been all these waves of technology. Look, AI is probably the biggest wave of any of them, and it will disrupt more than all of them. But I do think as humans, we still will have a place in the future, and there still will be a need for people, particularly in the near term at least, to be doing what we do already and just augmenting what we do with AI.
It's probably comparable to the first wave of robots or use of robots, where everybody was fearing that robots are going to take over everything and so forth and so on. So I think for AI, and of course our literature, science fiction does its part in stirring the imagination until we get to that point. Okay. So if you aren't working on AI and working your company, what are some of your hobbies that you partake in?
Yeah, good question.
When do you have time?
When I have time. The challenge is I've got 3 kids, so I spend most of my time as a taxi driver to and from after school sport and all of the rest of it. But when I've got a 16, 14 and 12-year-old. So
so you're almost done, right? When they hit 18, it's out.
Yeah, although the culture in Australia is for them to just stay with you forever. So I don't think my oldest is going to leave till he's about 25. But that keeps me busy, and I love spending time with my family and my kids. But on top of that, I'm into gaming, which I guess you expect from a technologist. So I love gaming.
Maybe not. Okay, yeah. Then we'll have to get into it. What do you game when you have time?
I'm big on the Finals, which is a new kind of first-person shooter, and then Battlefield, and then I also love a bit of Rocket League as well. So reasonably diverse.
Okay, well, I think a lot of our listeners, you're very, very popular now with a bunch of our listeners. You're human. You interact with your family, so you got the family points, and you have regular hobbies, so that makes you a very personable person.
Excellent. Glad I passed the test.
Yes. A plus on that one. But the funny thing is I have a daughter too. She's 3, and that just opens you to a whole new world of experience, and it's tough. There used to be an expression at one point, they called them boomerang kids. So in the States, because what would happen is that at 18, the kids would, be sent off to college. So you throw them out the door, so to say. And then after college, they come right back and they move back in. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're at the very start of it at 3 years old.
Yeah, so I still have a whole bunch of way to go. Okay.
It's interesting, actually, and a bit scary. I was having a conversation. I did a talk at a conference last week to the Australian Psychological Society and on AI. And one of the conversations that started at the end with one of the guests was, or one of the people in the audience was just about how there's going to be a generation that's going to grow up with AI. So I look back, and my eldest, who's 16, kind of, grew up with an iPad, and obviously that's not something that happened with me. And that was kind of weird enough. But now we're going to live in an age where, kids born today are going to grow up with AI, and they're going to have little toys, and, they're going to have little apps on their iPad that are going to be AI driven, that are going to have conversations with them and remember them and talk to them in ways, toys never did for us when we were kids, or even for kids that are 16 years old today. So
now the talking cactus is actually going to be able to answer some questions rather than just repeat what I'm saying. Great.
100%. Yeah, exactly. Very scary.
Oh, okay. So that's a little excursus into your personal life and what you do outside of AI. Let's get back to the topic, though. Given the dynamic nature of the digital and AI industry, how do you stay updated with the latest trends and advancements? I mean, do you subscribe to anything, or do you have any sources that you can recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, look, I think it's really hard to stay up to date across the breadth of AI. There's so much going on. I do have a bunch of feeds. Feeds that I kind of look through and that gives me some information. I think Ethan Mollick is a really good person to follow on LinkedIn. He's a really, highly esteemed kind of researcher in the field, so he's really good. I think then a lot of the, normal tech blogs, so TechCrunch and ones like that have AI sections that are good to lean into as well. The challenge always is the volume of information out there and the amount of information that you get fed day to day. So I know this sounds a bit weird, but I actually use AI to digest all the AI information. So I have a little plug-in in my browser, and I can press a button and it sends it off to OpenAI, and within a couple of seconds I have back a summary of all the content on the page. So I can kind of
wait a minute. I did some snoozing on your webpage, and there was on your webpage, I recall, you had some practical advice that people could actually already apply, which I thought was really, really cool. And one of those things was summarizing with the help of AI, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So you're referring to then at this point?
Yeah. So the reason I put that on the website is because I do a talk on AI to clients, and one of the first questions they have is, how do you stay up to date and how do you get across so much? And I always say I've got this little trick, and I always get asked how to do it. So a couple of weeks back, I thought I should probably put it on the web page so that people could actually see it. So it's a really handy little tool. Quick click of the button, and straight away you've just got dot points. It doesn't stop you from reading the articles. What I find for me is it allows me to quickly review information and then decide if I want to deep dive in certain parts of the article, if I want to deep dive into the whole thing. And I think that's one of AI's superpowers, is its ability to summarize information, and that's where it can add a lot of value.
Okay, and now just since we're on this topic, and I read through it, how does this? Let's just give our listeners here the opportunity. How does this work?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. There's a bunch of different plugins you can use, which will allow you to connect your browser to OpenAI or ChatGPT. Essentially, all you do is you give it some prompts, so you tell it how you want it to summarize the article, and then you connect it. You have to have an API key, so it costs you that. I think it's about $10 a month or something from OpenAI to have that key. But you buy an API key, plug it into this little tool, plug in your prompts. It gives you some starter prompts, which work okay, but you can kind of tailor them. And then that's it. Every time you're on a page, you just click the button and it just pops out in a little pop-up and just gives you the information. It's quite easy. And on top of that, now some of them have a section where you can kind of click a button and you can actually ask it a question about the content on the page. So you can actually have it dynamically kind of answer questions about the content on the page.
Wow. So it's a Cliff Notes for an AI Cliff Notes. You're familiar with the term Cliff Notes, right?
No, I'm not actually.
No. Oh, okay.
No.
Okay. Well, that's kind of old school. And there used to be in the way back when, there used to be like what we call in American English. America. Sorry. Oops. I completely bopped that one. Okay. In America, we used to have this thing called Cliff Notes, and basically it was like the condensed versions of various things. Extremely popular when in things like British literature, when you're trying to read Shakespeare. So Cliff Notes would give you a condensed summary of what
like a cheat sheet.
Shakespeare. Yeah. well, it was more than a cheat sheet. It was actually a little compendium. Like I said, I think it was even called Cliff Notes, or had that official name. And they would summarize, like Shakespeare and a whole bunch of other topics. So, okay, cool. So anybody who wants to check that out, just go to your guys' website, which is revium.com.au. And there on the front of the page, you can find it. It's, what was it called? Instantly Summarized Web Pages and Video Using AI. So I think that I was completely fascinated because I thought it was really cool that you guys actually offer, a practical tool that somebody can use and implement and, for free of charge. So I thought that was really cool. So awesome. Hopefully everybody understood it. And for those that didn't, like I said, there's a step-for-step instruction on there. So it should be possible to recreate. So that's how you basically you use that. Did you come up with that was that just a natural extension for you that you were like, wow, okay, I got all these threads that I'm getting, how can I leverage AI to condense that?
Yeah, look, I think in the early days, when you're learning about AI, I don't know, or generative AI in particular, when it started to really take off a year and a half ago, one of the first use cases was just summarizing things. And initially I was kind of cutting and pasting information out of a window and then cutting and pasting it into ChatGPT 2 or whatever it was back then, to test it out and use it and see how it worked. And to be honest, it wasn't very good back in those days at doing it very accurately. But yeah, over time it was like, oh, this is so useful, and then kind of started hacking things around and there's an obvious use case there, and so yeah, it just became easier and easier to do it. I was kind of doing it in more complicated ways, and now it's done to the point where I think it's like 6 dot points and you're away, 6 steps, and you can get it set up yourself. So it's a really handy way for me to digest a huge volume of information, on the daily, because I think probably on the daily there's probably 25 to 30 articles on AI that I'm getting in a feed that I'm trying to get across as quickly as possible. I tried to recruit my 16-year-old to help as a research assistant, but yeah, he wasn't very reliable. So I've had to use AI instead.
Where it used to be you had to mow lawns. Now you have to help your dad filter through articles on AI. Wow, that is a change of things. How the modern world changes. Okay, cool. Now you did kick off a term that I didn't, unfortunately, that I'm not too familiar with. You said generative AI. Can you explain that? Are there different forms of AI, just for those people that, listeners out there that don't know that there's a distinction between the forms of AI? For us, basic people, it's all one thing. So are there different categories?
Yeah, 100%. So what we've got at the moment is what we call generative AI, and it's really a subset of AI. So when I say generative AI, you're talking about OpenAI and Midjourney, image generation, all of the wave of AI at the moment that's blowing everyone's minds, that sits in a class called generative AI. That's really just a subset of the broader AI kind of family, if you like. It's a really broad church. And so generative AI is awesome because it can take existing knowledge, condense it down. It turns it into what I call machine code, but it turns it into tokens, and then into vectors, and then it turns into embeddings. But essentially, it condenses it all down into a form it can understand, and then it kind of pushes it all together into a relational database where it can understand the connections. And this is one of the challenges of AI. whilst we kind of understand what it's doing, we don't always necessarily understand exactly exactly why it's doing what it's doing and how those connections make sense to it. But that's what allows us to do all of the amazing things we can do now with ChatGPT, etc. That's kind of the pre-game show, though, really, because the big one is artificial general intelligence, or AGI. I had to think of what AGI was because, like I always just say AGI. Artificial general intelligence is the big one. So generative AI can take existing knowledge, rehash it, and kind of push it into different forms and stuff. And that's what we see with ChatGPT. Artificial general intelligence is actually trying to mirror the way human brains work, and sometimes some of the ways they're trying to build it is actually mirroring the way synapses in the brain work to build artificial intelligence that will be able to think independently, that will be able to reason and basically think like a human being, and then extend that beyond it. So if they can crack AGI, then it'll be the first time in the history of the world, as far as we know, where you'll have a being on Earth that will be more intelligent than a human. Yeah, but that's what they're talking about at the moment. Like, it's probably, they're saying it might be 10 years away, it might be 15, it might be 5. No one really knows because they haven't really cracked that. So, yeah, what we got at the moment, though, Gen AI, I think is amazing, but it is that pre-game show.
So if I just summarize in really layman's terms, the generative AI, not to put it down or anything, is like a glorified search engine. It's a very simple term. And the other actually intelligence that learns.
Yeah, intelligence and learns and can create new knowledge, I guess. So AGI can create new knowledge, whereas generative AI can take existing knowledge and can kind of utilize that to rehash things and do things differently. So it's limited to, it's not going to create new things. It'll help us find new things. So there's research they've done in medicine and stuff where it's helped to find new things, but it's done that just by accelerating the ways humans would do it. It can just do it a lot quicker and a lot faster.
So it can run through like billions of test sequences at a time versus okay. Wow. Okay. This is where it gets really complex. But okay, you've been in the digital space for 20 plus years, so you do have a wealth of knowledge and experience to draw from. But looking back on your time in the industry, how have you seen the perception and acceptance of AI evolve within the business landscape?
Yeah, look, I think it's still evolving. It's been around for a while now, but most of the time we're using what we call machine learning, which is a kind of a subset of AI, I guess, where it was really good at combing through data and coming up with insights and handling large volumes of information, and it could kind of take huge databases. So we did we used to use it for research, and you'd get all this customer data for a client, and you'd get it to go through all that data, and then it would come out with all of these insights and connections that were really hard for a human being to take that volume of data and come out with. So it was kind of handy, but it wasn't really revolutionary or all that amazing. And it was kind of part and parcel. It wasn't like it is now, where it's kind of doing amazing things. It was kind of doing some pretty cool stuff, but it wasn't rocking anyone's socks kind of thing. But over obviously the last 24 months, 18 months in particular, as the generative AI waves kind of started and they've cracked that code, now I think businesses now are kind of sitting up and paying attention to it. And I think it varies from business to business. I think there's naturally the skepticism. Anything new comes along, new technology, new capabilities, businesses are skeptical. There's also, sometimes a bit of hesitation because, some of the early tests with generative AI showed it can make mistakes, and that kind of concerns, businesses and business owners and leaders. But I think more and more what we're seeing now is kind of a willingness to engage with it, to start exploring it. And I think that's what, most businesses now are looking to do, especially the larger ones, is just understand it a bit better and then start to look at how we can, how they can start to use it in a controlled way, in a managed way that's
okay.
de-risked a little bit.
Is that driven by do you see mostly the companies doing that in order to like increase their efficiency, or they see it as the new tool that everybody needs to use, and if you're not using it, you're going to be left behind? You're basically, if you don't jump on this bandwagon, and let's say, as a simple example, the use of computers way back when, if you don't start using computers in your business, and you stick with a typewriter and so on, so you're going to be basically not able to function anymore. Would you say that is the main driver, or is it another?
No, look, businesses are about making money. At the end of the day, if you can be more efficient, you can make more money, or if you can be more competitive or, stay competitive, then you make more money. So I think it's both the factors you mentioned. Like, there's opportunities. I kind of see the way AI will impact businesses across three pillars. One will be augmenting kind of existing human capability. So that's making it easy for people to do their jobs more efficient, reducing the amount of mundane kind of tasks and repetitive tasks that humans do. Then you'll kind of see it have an impact across systems. So, your technology stack, whether that's a CRM or even learning and development tools, etc., it'll be making those smarter, more effective, more efficient. And then you'll have a third pillar, which will be doing things that we haven't thought of or that we've always wanted to do, but it was too technologically hard or too expensive or, whatever, or even some things or, service offerings or capabilities that we just hadn't imagined we could do before because it was out of the realms of possibility. So I think those are the three pillars. And I think the drive to adopt it is, that there is that fear of being left behind, but I think there's also this, emerging view, or not emerging now, it's probably beyond emerging, but this understanding that, there is efficiencies, there are, there's commercial gains to be had from exploiting AI.
Okay. So basically it's twofold, so to say. So there is definitely the sense that this new technology is something that you have to adapt, adopt, and familiarize yourself, at least to a certain degree. Not every business can integrate it or use it, or might not even make sense for their business, but most should at least have some idea of that. So do you find that are there any specific industries or sectors in your experience that have been particularly proactive in adopting AI for their business?
Yeah, look, I think there's varying adoption across each industry, but, finance in particular has been one that seems to have jumped, banks and finance. Anywhere where you've got large volumes of information or data and you want to glean insights or capabilities, exploit the capabilities of AI across that data set. So, I know over here, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, which is one of I think it's the largest bank in Australia. For the last 7 months, they've had AI doing fraud prevention work, where they've had it basically sitting in the background, looking at transactions, evaluating transactions, and then putting holds on things when it looks like it's fraudulent. And it's stopped about $200 million worth of mistaken or fraudulent transactions in 7 months. But this is the thing, people don't. It's not on the surface. So people are kind of thinking that businesses are starting to adopt AI because there's some consumer-facing aspects to it. But the reality is, behind the scenes, some of these bigger organizations have already been kind of implementing it for a while now and getting value out of it already. So there is that side of it where, you need to keep in mind, I went for a car lease the other day, and I actually, after, the lease went through, I went back to the bank and asked them if they used AI to do any decisioning on my lease, and they came back and said, yes, we did use AI to do decisioning on your lease. So, it's happening. We just don't ask the questions, and they're not overt about telling us that it's happening.
Wow. Okay. Interesting that came up, but of course, you're from the field, so and you said the financial sector was that. But what would you? I think you mentioned it earlier, but just to rehash that point, what do you think was the breakthrough, or what specific trend has significantly impacted AI and how it's applied in organizations? So is there any point you mentioned it earlier, I believe, but this topic's new for me, so I can't recollect everything that we just said. So can you demark like the point in time or the specific event or development that you think, really basically brought everything to its current situation?
Yeah. Oh, look, I think you have to give credit to OpenAI and the work they did kind of cracking what they call the large language model, which is the core database and the core kind of platform, if you like, that does all the thinking for generative AI. So that was kind of, the early versions of ChatGPT before it really, it became popular. I guess it was a year and a half ago, maybe, when it really became publicly popular, maybe a year ago when ChatGPT 3 came out, I guess. But even before that, people in the industry were kind of sitting up and paying attention with the early versions of it. So once that they cracked the way to do generative AI and how to actually get these what we call large language models, understanding information, able to pump out the sorts of answers that showed that it did not understand, but it could utilize that information to produce answers. That was kind of the tipping point. And then once that happened, it kind of democratized access to AI. So before that, you had to be really, a full-on computer scientist who understood, stuff that I don't understand, to get into actually, play with AI and use it. But through this process and through the way that OpenAI kind of presented it, you suddenly had this interface where you didn't have to be a programmer to actually start leveraging and using it, and it opened the doors to all the things we're seeing today.
Okay. So did that then, so basically it made it available for, everyone to use. So did that then, but in the background, leading up to that, like you said, since the finance sector, you mentioned, was one of the strongest adopters of AI. So they must have already adopted that use of AI earlier, because it was probably a very complex thing. Like I said, now we're at the point where you have a 5-step model to summarize all your readings. But prior to that, it was probably just not in the public attention as it was to the point when ChatGPT came out.
Yeah. I think what happened was the breakthrough in that there was an actual breakthrough in kind of designing these large language models. So that before those, it was as I said, it was more machine learning. It was more basic kind of processing of data and all of that sort of stuff. And then when they kind of cracked the code of how we could get this into these new models, it kind of changed the game completely. So it was a technical innovation, if you like, that kind of had a start date. There were heaps of people working on it. OpenAI cracked it, earliest and well, not earliest, but, got theirs to market earliest, if you like. And, rightly they should have, because they had a lot of money behind them and a lot of smart people behind them. So, but yeah, that really changed the game. And I think once they kind of worked some of that out, there's others who were also doing the same thing, but they started publicizing it. I think that's when it became public, that's when the businesses jumped on it. So, there's all these specialist, really large corporates who probably had departments who were working on this sort of stuff behind closed doors and trying to find ways to use it. But when, it suddenly kind of burst out onto the scene and it was public, it makes it a much easier sell to a board, I think, when you've got something that they can see and feel, more broadly than it's just a bunch of IT nerds in some department telling them they could use this thing to do this or that.
Okay. Well, since you've been you've been basically in the field for 20 plus years, did you see this coming, or were you like, did you have was there any feel in the industry that, of course, you don't know exactly what the breakthrough might be, but did you have like a sense of this could happen, or something like this could happen?
I think it was one of those things where, embarrassingly, no. Like, I wish I did, because I'd probably be a lot richer than I am now, because I've made some bets on it. But
well, you don't have to have. It's that's putting you kind of on the spot, because essentially, since you've been in this field such a long time, then you kind of have a feeling what general direction it's going. Now, it's kind of like drilling for oil. I mean, it's out there, but who's good, or a gold rush, whatever. Everybody's going after gold, but who's going to hit it first? That's the question. So that's what I was saying when you not specifically, like you said, invest in this guy's going to break a breakthrough. We're going to invest there. But did you have a general sense that there was something that everybody was working on in the industry that?
100% you knew, and there was a lot of smart people, and you had Google's DeepMind team, and they what was it when they had AlphaGo, when they when AI beat a human player at chess was kind of the first one, and it's like, oh my god, AI compared. Yeah, long time ago, and then it evolved into AlphaGo, which was the game. I don't know if there's a game called Go, I think it is, and it's really complicated, and there's millions of different moves, and then I actually thought that was going to be that was going to be the tipping point, because they came out and said, well, this AlphaGo model has beaten the best player in the world at that particular game, and it was so complex, it means we're going to this is a breakthrough. And then you sat back after that thinking, okay, everything's going to change. And then a year or so went by, or two, and it's like, well, it hasn't actually changed that much, and they haven't really found a way to get it to do much else. Obviously, they were in the background. There's a whole heap of stuff going on, and really what we see in the public, or what even I see in when you're involved in the sector, is the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's going on underneath. But yeah, so I think it was always like there was news, there was breakthroughs and all that sort of stuff, but you probably didn't anticipate just how quickly everything was going to change. I mean, when I do a talk on this stuff, I kind of show, a year ago there was a video of when someone did text to video generation, and they did a video and they said Will Smith eating spaghetti, and you should YouTube it, because it's like he's shoving it through the side of his face and his head and everything. It's like the worst video you've ever seen. And that was kind of the first, version of, oh, well, this is what we can do with video generation using AI. Whereas now we've got the videos that came out recently by OpenAI, the new Sora service that they've talked about, where you've got these videos coming out that just look like they're, they're close enough to movie style quality videos that are coming out from text generation. And that's happened in under 1 year, that level of development. So I think, when you started to see it coming out, you thought, well, this is going to be awesome and this is going to change things. The pace of change, I guess, is the thing now. It went slowly. It had fits and starts for maybe a decade, and then suddenly now it's just like, wow, it's just going, so fast.
Well, this is a perfect segue to now putting you really on the spot. So the point I'm going to put you on the spot on is the following question that I just thought of. So you've talked about how everything developed and so forth, but where do you see the next big leap or innovation happening in the AI landscape? So this is where I get to put you on the spot and say, What do you think?
Look, I think where I'm seeing it happening is in the video space. So you think about the ability to create a video at the moment. What we've seen with Sora is you can kind of type a sentence or a couple of sentences in, and it will come back with 30 seconds or so of really amazing video. It doesn't have audio with it though, it's just the video, so it can't generate the audio with it and sync that to people talking and all of that sort of stuff. I'm really keen to see over the next 12 months how that advances, because if they can crack the code where you can type a description of a scene along with the dialogue and get that to happen, imagine the implications for that. I go to training videos, I go to movies, I go to TV shows, everything and anything. It's going to have a huge impact. So that will be remarkable if they can do it. I mean, I know that they're trying to do it because they've talked about the fact that they're trying to do it. Obviously, one of the biggest issues at the moment for them as well is safety, and just making sure that, you don't give it to the wrong people who are trying to generate the wrong things. But that would be remarkable, and I think that would be the next big thing. When you're saying that, are
you referring to like deep fake or
deep fakes, or all sorts of the sorts of uses that you would want to have people, where they could get it to do certain actions or show certain things that you just wouldn't want it to be doing. So they're the things that you need to put some safety guardrails around, and that's one of the challenges with AI. It's not like traditional development. When we used to build or when we used to build things, like it was 10 years ago, like we still, do coding now, obviously in development, but when you build applications or build software, it's, kind of if else statements and everything's, you can trace it down. So when you get a bug in a system, you can go back and go, oh, here, this particular line of code said the wrong thing, and you can fix it. And so you know what you're going to get out, and you know why you got the outcome. With generative AI, you don't necessarily know exactly what you're going to get out. It's a lot about kind of inputting and testing and seeing what you get out, and then going back and retraining it. And it really is training. You're training the AI to give you the output you want, and that's what that's what's exciting about it. But it's also what makes it kind of time and labor intensive to actually develop the tools to actually use in any sort of commercial sense.
Interesting. This it kind of reminds me of. Did you watch the movie Oppenheimer by any chance?
I haven't yet. No, I've seen it almost. I should.
Well, not giving anything away because it means our history. So
yeah, no spoilers.
I'm not going to spoil anything, but there was this kind of reminds me of the situation, or in a kind of like extracted sense. There was a scene in there basically where basically they were going to fire the first nuclear bomb, and there was a group of scientists that basically said, if you fire this thing, you're going to kill everybody on the planet because, in essence, it's going to light up the atmosphere. And Oppenheimer pressed the button. So, and they tested the first. He believed it wouldn't be so, but in a very remote sense, when you said put guardrails about AI, I see only that in essence the same decision is here. Is that there's a certain part of saying we know what's going to happen, and another group saying, or another statement saying, we're unsure what's going to happen. We don't know what the possibilities might. So there have to be, like certain safety measures around that.
Yeah, it's not 100% predictable, that's for sure. And I think it's interesting, different jurisdictions, different countries are taking different approaches. And obviously the EU have come out quite strongly with some laws around it. You see in the States, not really yet. I know here in Australia, our government's kind of done an interim kind of, look into AI, but hasn't come out with any legislation or laws to control it yet. So, I think it's really hard for any jurisdiction to go on their own. Like the EU, got some controls there, which is fantastic. But if everyone else doesn't have controls, well, you're not going to be able to slow AI down because everyone else is just going to do their own thing. So it's an interesting space, and the ethics around it are really interesting. And, as a technologist, I try to put my ethical mind to it, but there are things in there that really, there's a lot of deep thinking that needs to go into that, and there's a lot of, there's a need for organisations within society and within the community to kind of to find their voice on this, to talk about the impact it's going to have on society. We need to think through that, and we need to have a conversation about it, and I think that needs to happen sooner rather than later.
Okay. So we delved off a little bit off course, but we segued in with your response to the question I had originally. We segued kind of into the second part, which was basically the learning development thing. So, how do you see AI specifically impacting learning development from your perspective? How can it change? I mean, you alluded to it at least when you said that's going to be the next big thing that you believe, the creation of video content, and when they finally if they can get not only the images but the voice and everything to work together, that would be a significant impact, I would say, on the learning development, especially anybody who does web-based trainings. Do it like that.
I mean, we're already seeing on the video space at the moment, the talking heads. So, the video of us, doing this podcast, you can run it through tools now that'll translate it into different languages, and it'll have my lips moving at the same time in sync, and it'll have my voice saying the words in a different language, fully translated without me doing anything. So there's already those tools out there that can do that sort of stuff, which I think will have a huge impact on the learning and development space, because it will, it'll allow businesses to quickly and easily take their existing video materials and translate them into other language, which will be a time saver. I think more generally, though, if you think about more broadly what it's going to do for learning and development, I think it's going to open a lot of doors to things that were always too hard or too expensive, and particularly around personalising the learning and development experience for people. I think that's going to be one of the early, advancements that it's going to offer. So, when you talk about, if someone's going through a program or, seeking assistance on something from a chatbot or whatever it might be, you can tailor that chatbot to how that person likes to learn, the language, the way it speaks, the way it, maybe some people like to have something explained to them with an example, like a scenario, and it'll be able to do that, or it will be able to just explain it to someone who likes to have it as just a step-by-step instruction, and it'll be able to do that. So it'll, you'll be able to configure it if you like, or you'll be able to probably just tell it, hey, this is the way I prefer to learn. And it will adapt to that. It'll take the information it needs to teach you, and it'll adapt to that in the way it delivers it to you. So things like that, I think, will be a massive game changer, because it means that everyone's experience through a learning and development program can potentially be, specifically personalized and tailored to their learning style and their needs. And also feedback, it will be able to look at the way people are interacting with materials and look at the way they're responding to that and the outcomes, and give them individualized feedback on that automatically. So, which is quite remarkable. And this is work we're already starting to do with some clients. So
really?
It's pretty exciting.
Okay,
yeah.
So you're at the precipice of everything here. So, okay, cool.
Yeah, well, look, I don't think we're the only ones. I think there's a lot of businesses out there now exploring this space. But and look, it's definitely not, widely adopted yet, because it is still in the early days. But yeah, I think it's definitely, there's a lot of opportunity there, and it'll be interesting to see how that pans out, and how, I don't know the industry obviously as well as you do, how kind of the industry adapts to that, and whether some of the big software players and big players, how they start to intertwine it within their systems, etc.
Well, I can say looking, since working with the IMC, I worked, started off in content, so creating content, creating web-based training and so forth. So there I can see, like you said, the application is clearly one that, the ability to create content. And if that ability to create content isn't confined to like specialists, rather it can be given to, individuals that are not, like specialized in the fact, but maybe that are subject matter experts in the topic they want to, inform about. So, be it one computer language or something like that, then, there's a lot of potential, and a lot of changes can happen there. We have one of our tools that allows us to relatively easily create content already for individuals that aren't, learning designers or instructional designers and so forth. However, and this is where we'll see how AI comes in. There's still the factor when you mentioned feedback, because one of the things, for example, instructional design is very important, because it's how people learn, how individuals learn, how you get the materials that that you want to teach. How do you present that? And that is where I'm not sure if AI can close that gap at the moment. So I still see that as being, largely still upon the individual. Or I used to do kind of filming, and one of the rules is good input, good output, crappy input, crappy output, and I see that here also being the case. So yes, AI can do very much, but there's still the factor of how will it be able to interpret that human factor, that creation of how the learning experience is done, that it can create what you want. So if you say exactly, do this, this, and this, I'm sure it can do that. But the nuances of that is where I still see a large difference. So would you say that there's been a growing interest in AI from L&D companies?
Yeah.
And
100%, yeah.
Okay. What factors do you see what do you see as the driving factors behind that?
I think the main factor is access to knowledge. It makes access to knowledge a bit easier. So, when you look at the training programs, as you said before, it's very much about that, garbage in, garbage out is the term where you kind of use in development land. But it's about, you still need the humans, and you still need the knowledge to be disseminated into a form that the AI can ingest and understand and then utilize. So that's always going to be there, because it can't see or experience the world the way we can, or not yet. But yeah, you need that. But I think when you go into how it can quickly give you access to a huge knowledge base, and allow you to distinctly kind of just ask a question about a bit of information instead of having to wade through information. It can present it instantly. So, one use case we've got at the moment, we've got a client with 650 staff who are in support roles. Those 650 staff, the knowledge base that they operate with, they've got knowledge stored across 3 kind of different systems. And if they want to find something, they've got to fiddle around, and it takes them a bit of time. They always don't know exactly which area to look at, etc. So it takes them a long time to find that information, particularly for newer staff. So newer staff who've come on board, they've had, their initial training, and then it's kind of, okay, away you go. It's hard to remember where everything is and where to find things. So, these AIs are really good. Generative AI is really good at just going, okay, cool, let's suck all that knowledge in, put it into a single kind of database, and then allow people to have a conversation with the bot to ask questions, and it can instantly draw back the information or the answer to them. So it makes it really quick and easy for them to be able to kind of go, okay, I need to, how do I do this? Or I've forgotten how to do this. What are the steps? And it will come back and say, here are the steps to do that, which makes it really quick and easy. It's not frontline training, initial training, but it's that assistance with recall, assistance with,
information searches, and trying to, I think I read about this. One of the significant things was making things more, the searches more natural. So the ability basically to interpret the desire of an individual or a person in a form that you can basically, just write it or say it, and then it'll do it how should I put this? Am I on the right track with this in explaining it? It was that the idea was that it's more natural. It's like if I would ask you a question, then I wouldn't have to be very specific. Well, I do to a certain degree, but you are able to interpret, to the right and left of what my question might be, making it a whole question and allowing you for a better answer.
Humans by design are, we've grown up talking to each other, interacting, and there's a way we do that. Then the web came along, and, search bars or looking through folders to find files or wikis or intranets or whatever, we kind of learned a different behavior, but our natural base behavior is just to have a conversation or to ask a question. And that's what it allows it to do, is exactly what I think you're trying to say, that you can just have it almost like naturally that you would have a conversation. Human nature is to ask a question and get an answer. The other thing that, the real advantage it gives you in that space is, there might be a long process or policy or something with, different sections in it. I can ask a question, and instead of, if I did it the old way, I'd go through a process, I'd find that particular page or document or piece of information, that I'd scroll through to the bit of information I needed. With this, you ask the question and it will just give you the specific bit of information you need at the specific step. So you could say, I'm stuck at this step in a process. It will just tell you the next step in that process. So it's a real time saver.
Will it extract just the direct content, or will it, in combination like with your summary, will it take that content and then summarize it for you in a shorter version then again?
That's exactly right. It'll summarize it. And as I said before, if it knows your learning, potentially if it knows your learning style or the way you prefer to be communicated with, it will, it'll transform the information into that style or form that you'd prefer. So if you'd like it in step by step, or if you'd like it in a scenario, if you'd like it to be explained in a different way, it'll do all of that. And that's where I guess the video comes in down the track, because then, in theory, you'd be able to then kind of have it generate, a visual response for you, potentially in another couple of years.
Okay. What would be really scary if it creates content like immediately, based on your query, like you said. Is that where you're leaning to, if I understand that correctly? That it would not only do, like, let's say, it comes back, and if it were to, we're talking about way in advance, I think, but would it be able to then actually, or is your vision, what you're saying is that it would not only answer your question, but it would create content based on that specific question for like a one-use scenario to just respond to that?
So at the moment, like what we're talking about now is chatbots where you're typing and you're getting a single-use scenario. The responses that come back aren't bits of the text that it copies and pastes. It takes that information and it rehashes it and writes it in a response. So it's like the conversation we're having. But yeah, in the future, I can foresee a time where it will, if your learning preference is visual learning and it's talking about how you might do things, it will come up with a video with someone standing, someone there talking, with a slideshow behind them or a slideshow next to them showing the concepts moving around or something like that, to visually explain the concept to you or visually explain the process to you or whatever. That's not something that's happening in the next 6-12 months, but it might be something that's happening in 24 months time. That's the rate of change. It's a big bold prediction. I'm not saying it will definitely happen, but that's the direction we're heading. That's where you think about it. When you go back 12 months or 18 months, I don't think anyone would have thought you could have one of these things, ask it a question, then it would come back with a personalized answer, with all the information in a text chat. So extension of that video, why not?
Okay. Well, so we naturally migrated to the, since you brought up the topic of chatbots, that's one that I had also looked at. So in the context of chatbots, what benefits have you observed in terms of learner engagement and interaction? How can you organize the leverage chatbots effectively to enhance the learning experience? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think, obviously you got the knowledge search I mentioned, or the ability to quickly and easily get information. I think that's a double-edged sword, though, in the learning and development space, because it can make people lazy and just the AI has all the answers. So you end up just asking the question every time you get to a step and it'll just tell you what to do next. So there's a risk there as well in having that capability.
Okay, wait a minute. Lazy in the, in one, when I'm thinking about learning and development, you're saying that so the creation of the chatbot will make the learner then effectively lazy, in the sense that you're now no longer willing to commit the information to any memory, because you're saying, what do I need to worry about this? If I have a question, then I'll just ask chatbot and it'll come up with an answer.
I think that's a definite risk. You go back to the old days of when calculators, it's like, why do I need to know how to do division or something? Because I'm just going to have a calculator there to do it for me. I think you'll get the same thing with this, where you just go, it's going to be a crutch for a lot of people, where they're just going to go, well, I'll have the chatbot there, or, I'll have this instant access to all the information that'll tell me step by step what I need to do if I forget. So do I really need to remember or recall it? So I think that is a risk in the space.
It is a risk. Interesting, because I hadn't thought of that. So, we'll be putting out a whole bunch of learning stuff, and in the end, that will progress to not only having tools that, teach you, but then, of course, those same tools can be used to assist you in your daily work needs, where you then might, like you said, that the danger is then that you say, I don't even have to commit this to memory, because I have to honestly say I find myself in that same situation, but differently, that when it comes to schedules, I let my wife do all the scheduling. and when I have a question on the schedule, ask her.
Yeah. Look, and I could say there's an AI for that now too, but I won't. But yeah, but you're right. I mean, that's a risk, and I think that's going to be the challenge. Is that's up to people to take the initiative to say no. I need to, and it's about elevating yourself to add value. So I think that's a risk. I think the other thing that one of the areas it's really good at, though, on the flip side, is actually assessing people's understanding and progression and all that sort of stuff. So, a lot of the time, evaluating long form responses to questions. So if you're doing some evaluation of someone's, progress, you're often confined to A, B, C, D, or E questions, or you confined to certain kind of approaches where it makes it really easy to grab all that information and assess it. Well, with AI, what we've found is it's really good at making assessments about people's responses in long form. So what we can do is we can set it up to say, okay, we need a person to learn this particular module. You're going to set up and ask the person a set of questions, and we let the AI, you can let the AI actually generate the questions for you. So it'll generate the questions. It will then take the answers to those questions, and then it'll compare the answers to the learning materials and evaluate whether the person's answered right. And you can do it to levels of correctness and all of that sort of stuff. And it can highlight for each question where they had a good understanding, or they had, or where there were gaps in understanding, or both. And then that was what I was saying before, you can then get into personalized follow-up. So once you do that evaluation, it can then, take the next step to design the next kind of part of the training to hone in on those areas where it's noticed that there's a gap in the understanding.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty impressive. So leading from that, though, I think for our listeners out there, I think you've already explained some of the touch points and so forth where AI and learning development have a commonality, what outlooks we have for the use. So your advice for organizations considering implementing AI in their learning development strategy, what practical tips or steps would you offer based on your experience? In addition, what are some common pitfalls? That would be the combined question.
Yeah, look, I think the first thing is going big bang. I wouldn't go big bang, try and do everything, come up with this amazing idea. The stuff I just talked about there, it's all possible to do, but it's going to be it's not an off the shelf platform or anything that you can go out and get. It's something you're going to have to build and develop, and that'll take time. So, I'd suggest the first step is, education, getting an understanding, getting your team an understanding, getting people excited about the opportunity, because, initially, if you don't invest in that as the first step as a business, you'll have people who just put their guards up straight away, who just don't want to know about, who don't want to embrace it, who are like, I don't want to know about AI, I don't need to know about it. So I think it's important to do the education to get everyone on board to understand the opportunities and what it presents. Then I would say explore, it's all about exploring and trying things, doing little tests, having play with different tools. I mean, AI, the generative AI wave's been fantastic for democratizing access to technology. You've got all these tools like OpenAI, Midjourney. There's heaps of them out there that you can go out. Hey Gen is another one where you can do those video translations. They've all got free platforms where you can go out and just test them and play with them and try them out. So, doing that sort of stuff, I think, is, getting your team and your staff to start to do that sort of stuff and get them more comfortable with it. That's where I kind of start. And then you kind of move to, okay, let's have a look at what we do and let's try and isolate some potential use cases that are practical and build out little proof of concepts. And a proof of concept is usually something that's small, a little piece of tech or a little piece of capability, usually doesn't involve too much investment and just proves out whether it could potentially work in that space or not. And just do it in little patches to start as you get comfortable with it, before you kind of, turn around and map out this whole AI transformation for your business.
Okay. Wow. Okay. That's fantastic. So whoever's listening to the podcast, just rewind this section a couple times. You have now a step-for-step guide, because the question that if you listen to this, then you have a step-for-step guide. But I think you mapped it out very well. But I would, when looking at our organization, even I think that's a very tough step to take, though. Just because in a certain to a certain case, you have. I think the first step is you need to once again analyze your business and see where you think you can leverage AI in what you do. Would be like the first fundamental step from that. And then personally, I think, do you offer that? I mean, do you offer that not only in development, but do you give companies that type of advice, escorting them through a process like that? Is that one of your things that you also do?
Yeah, so one of the big things at the moment that I do, I spend a lot of my time talking about this stuff. I think last week I did 3 or 4 different either conferences or talks to clients or prospect clients, where the first thing I do is kind of a 1 hour introduction to AI, where I kind of talk through some of the stuff we've talked through today. Got the slide deck and all of that, just to introduce people to the idea, and then normally off that we move to help them, if they haven't already got in place, put in place some guidelines about the use of AI within their organization and develop an AI policy, because it's important to have some guardrails there. And then from there, we kind of move into workshops where we'll do half-day workshops where we get different teams in the organization and we kind of help them ideate, like where in the organization, now that you kind of understand a bit more about AI, where in the organization do you, in your business, in your role, in your department, do you think there's opportunities that you've heard about that you could potentially use it for? We explore that with them and then come up with these, proof of concept ideas that we can then, present up the chain to kind of say, hey, here's some ideas, we could do this, try this out, try that out, and test and learn. So, yeah, that's definitely a big part of what our business is today, and I see it being more and more, because I think, almost all industries and all businesses will, be able to leverage AI in some way that will give them a benefit, will give them, a good positive return on investment. So, I think it's just a case that, as I said, probably at the start, leaning in is really important. If you don't lean in, then, in a couple of years' time, you'll find there's other, all your competitors that have lent in will be ahead of you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like basically you take a little bit of the fear and anxiety away from taking that step in that direction. So I think you do a very good job at that.
Hopefully I
do. Well, I mean, in our discussion now, I mean, you've explained a lot of things very nicely, and given us an outlook on where you see things going, both from a general perspective. So I think that was very good. And also, in the learning development area. So for those individuals listening to the podcast from L&D, there shouldn't be a general fear. Rather, there are companies like yours out there to help support that type of transition and to help manage that. And I think that's very helpful, because I think, the worst thing is to, start off with something and then get frustrated with it not working, or having it, work in a different direction. And then you've wasted a lot of time and energy. And the worst thing that can happen is that you have a, negative outcome, which then, prevents you from progressing in that. So with the final question of the day, or actually 2 final questions, what would you, as a key takeaway for our podcast listeners, what would you recommend them in their daily life? Actually, I don't think that question applies. Or it does apply, because we answered that in the beginning with your summary part. So, okay, we'll leave that question out. Sorry, that's a standard question that I have to all my speakers. I think anybody who wants to, for that question, just check out the website. Like I said, revium.com.au. And there, I think you guys can look at the summary. What do you call that thing? Summary
tool, I think it is.
Summary tool.
Like that, but you'll see it there.
Okay. I think that's the most hands-on application that we've had in the podcast.
Awesome.
We've had a lot of advice and a lot of recommendations, but this is actually something that you guys have, before the podcast, that you guys already had an offering. So, and you simply click on it and then you go through the steps and voila. You can condense everything. So really cool. I might actually have to try that. Okay. Well, we'll see. Okay. So the final question is, do you have any recommendations for the next podcast guest or topic that you think we should explore? Guest might be a little bit tough because you're putting somebody on the spot without notice. So.
Look, I would a topic actually that I'd be interested in the space that I've always been curious about is learning and development for new starters. Bringing someone new into the business, and this is probably a selfish question or selfish topic on my part, but how do you space that learning and development out, and what's best practice in terms of, do you try and condense everything up front and get people across all the information in the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, or should you be spreading that out over 6 months or 12 months, which gives you better outcomes? Because we've dabbled with different ways, and I think it's always hard to work out what's best, because there's so much information when you come into a new role. It can obviously be incredibly overwhelming, but at the same time, if they don't have all the information up front, well, sometimes when you're in a role and you don't know everything, that can also be overwhelming if you feel like you don't know what you need to know. So I think, hopefully that's a relevant question, but that's something I'd really be interested to hear about.
Very good question. I think it's something that probably every business has to struggle with to a certain case. Even looking at our onboarding, sometimes you have a tendency that you kind of have like that information dump the first 2 weeks when you do an onboarding. You're bombarded with everything from your logins to access and so forth and so on. And at the same time, there's also things like learning the culture and learning just who to contact as an individual, when you need to talk to somebody, or who has the knowledge or wherewithal or the power to get certain things going. So it's not only learning the to-dos,
the practicals and the policies, the processes, and
of course, there also, like you said, there's a question: how do you weigh that? Teaching an individual versus getting them into productive, because that's also a business have to deal with that. And we have consultants. Yeah, we have consultants. So of course, you want them to be productive and to basically earn something for the company. So they can't forever be stuck in a learning phase.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Okay, Adam. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for being available. Thanks for spending some time on this podcast. And as I heard, you've spoken a lot of times. So I'm glad your vocal cords are still up to it. And thanks for all the knowledge you imparted on us. So highly appreciated. And any last words from you?
No, look, just thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to see what AI does do in the L&D space. It's something we'll be involved with in some parts, but I think it's just an exciting time to be alive. So and hopefully today there's some information, some value that I could to give to your listeners. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
This podcast is released once a month and presented to you by IMC Learning. I'm your host, Kenneth Littlepage. If you liked the episode, we would be happy if you subscribe to our podcast and recommend it to your friends and colleagues.